Hey folks, John Kelly. Welcome back to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. This podcast is being brought to you by On Target Claims, where their motto is on target from setback to settlement. Now listen, a little background. I've worked with these guys on the job, on the street for over 25 years, man, and they have always done the right thing and have always had my back. Now, in this second chapter, let them have your back. Right? You wouldn't go to court without an attorney. Why would you go up against an insurance company without representation, right? They represent you, the policyholder, when you go up against an insurance company submitting a claim. And I can tell you this, right? From beginning to end, they're going to be with you during the entire process. They're going to properly document that claim with the latest technology. And then when it comes time to getting things fixed, they've got a complete stable of vendors that are certified that are going to get it done right the first time. They also offer a pre-loss planning and policy review. So you know exactly what you're covered for, right? Make sure that you're adequately covered. The time to find out that you're not isn't after that horrific event. Okay? So give my friends a call at On Target Claims, 561-208-1775, or go to their website, ontargetclaims.com. They cover the entire state of Florida, offices in Fort Lauderdale and Tampa, and tell them John sent you. And now, let's get to the episode. Excellent. Hey, folks, John Kelly. Welcome back to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. I am sitting down with Ken Valentine. Man, what a life of service. Secret Service from beginning to end, which is, that's kind of a unicorn, man. Usually there's something that predicates that. He wrote a book, Cheating Death. Ken was on protective details for 3 sitting presidents, just a wealth of experience. And he authored this book. And I got to tell you, man, you need to pick it up because he throws you a curveball in all the right ways. A man of faith who has combined his life experiences and his walk with Christ into something that makes sense. And that's the best way I can put it, man. And so without further ado, Ken Valentine, thanks for taking the time, brother.
John, it is my pleasure. That's probably the best and longest introduction I've ever heard, but it's spot on. I appreciate it. Great job.
Oh man, my pleasure, my pleasure. So you've had this career, and that I think I don't think a lot of people can relate to, and I mean that in a good way, because you're held to such a higher standard. Because failing, really fail. Listen, most of us when we go to work, if we don't do a good job, we'll get an opportunity to do it better tomorrow. Right? There's always that. Oh, you know what? All right, tomorrow we'll dot those I's and cross those T's tomorrow. But when you're tasked with the protection of the leaders of the free world, and for you, 3 sitting presidents, you got to get that right every time, man.
Yeah, there are a lot of people kind of counting on us to get it right. And there are a lot of people that are rooting for us to get it wrong.
Right.
There are a lot of people out there that would like to see our president get hurt or even be killed. Not necessarily Americans, but certainly there's a subset of people that don't care.
No doubt.
I remember even going all the way back to the Reagan shooting when I got on the school bus at the end of the school day, and we got on there, and our bus driver was the one who told us that Reagan was shot, and one of the kids on the bus cheered. And so there's always people kind of rooting against you, but
right.
But for the most part, we got a lot of encouragement. We certainly got a lot of support because Secret Service is so small, you can't do it without a ton of support. But yeah, we live with that every day, and this notion that if we don't do our job, Murphy's always there, and
no doubt.
Murphy will get you if you don't do your job right, and if you don't stay on point and be vigilant and pay attention to those details.
Yeah, no, that's what I love, a job that matters.
Mm.
right? Because I mean, there are so many out there that you know, listen, everybody has a role to play, but I really I like the stakes to be high. If I'm going to go to work, let it matter. Let my performance matter. Um, just for the listener, could you give us a little history up until you starting out and kind of getting involved um with this mission, and then I want to tie in the book throughout. Um, and you mentioned right off the bat um that about tension and having the appropriate tension, and I thought that some of the analogies that you use, man, was just spot on. And so if we could kind of talk about that and the beginning of this journey, um, I'd love to hear it from you, man.
Yeah. Well, for me, it goes back to, gosh, I'm going to say it goes back to early childhood. I remember being at my grandmother's house and picking up a book called 4 Days, and it was about the Kennedy assassination. And I
Okay.
was fascinated with that book. It still didn't translate into me wanting to be a Secret Service agent. I think I was just fascinated with the whole, all the police and even Secret Service, but just the tragedy of the day and these color photos of all that stuff. And then fast forward to college, my dad was an FBI agent, and I always thought, I'm going to do federal law enforcement. I'm going to be an FBI guy like my dad. He's my hero. He's,
Sure.
he did it right. He's just a great guy. At his retirement, all the local police, state police, and local police came and I'm not out of school, I hope, but it was the FBI that was out of place. Because Dad
Sure.
was he was just such a good guy, and everyone loved him.
Well
And
respected by the whole community.
he worked and played well with others, which is
Yeah.
not always, hey, the big time feds. Sometimes
Right.
we don't do that right. So he was my example. But Ronald Reagan came to Purdue University when I was a senior,
Okay.
and I didn't have a huge interest in fighting the crowds. I did not get a ticket to hear him speak at the main event at Mackey Arena, but my dad was asked to participate in the buildup, the advance as an intel guy, as a protective
Okay.
intelligence, and my dad had arrested every lookout that they had, so so he was kind of a natural choice to, you know, bring this guy along. He can identify him, and
Sure. He
we
he
see him,
knows
we
all the
get him in some
players.
guys. Yeah, he knows all the players. So, but at the last minute, my roommate Tom said, "Let's just go to the airport." Well, we had to walk all the way across West Lafayette to get to the airport to see Air Force One come in, and I saw the counter assault team do their thing they had a van at the time, and then just passing by some of the agents, and so all of these things are kind of going in your tank for
Sure.
later use, and my dad so enjoyed the experience that as I'm graduating from college, he said, number one, you're never going to get hired in federal law enforcement without a law degree.
There you
So
go.
you're going to have to do that. And number two, when you do, you really got to look at Secret Service because the culture is just different. There's something different about the Secret Service. You really, he said, I don't think you're going to enjoy the FBI because
He
you're going to,
he gleaned that, you think, from just his interactions with them on
yeah,
different operations, different levels.
became
Yeah.
lifelong friends with the Secret Service
Sure.
guys, just loved them. And there was just something different about the way they went about their business. And so he was really encouraging that. And the FBI had a hiring freeze about the time I was finishing law school,
Okay.
which, I still wasn't listening to Dad at that point. But when the hiring freeze came on, I did listen. And
No,
so
no doubt.
this is the happy accident, is that now I'm getting ready to graduate from law school, get married, and have no job.
Yeah, no
so,
doubt.
so I at least had to try something else, and so I
Sure.
put in with Secret Service, and that ended up working. But and I think Dad was right. The culture's just different. Nothing against any other federal law enforcement agency, but there's something special about Secret Service, and I loved it. I wouldn't have traded. Even now after retiring and looking back, it's like, no, that was the thing for
Yeah.
me. That fit me. That was a good thing.
I remember in the book you had actually said some things that I have said really throughout my entire career. It's like I would do this for free. That I get paid to do this.
Yeah.
And so you found a home when those thoughts will actually, you'll
Yeah.
actually verbalize them that this is
Yeah.
the best job in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I still love it. I mean, if they'd have let me keep on doing it, I would still be doing it. But
No
the
doubt.
truth is, there is an end game, and it's
Sure.
not. Uh,
Well, and the other thing is, you passing on all that knowledge and expertise to the next generation, right? Passing the torch, right?
yeah, yeah.
And
You got to give it up at some point. I remember I was a shift leader on the president's detail, so you're kind of the operational quarterback, and I just loved it. I seemed to thrive in that environment, like you were talking about, having a mission, and even within the Secret Service, that particular mission was high burnout rate. About a year was really about all most people wanted to put up with. But man, I was
just
at the
because of the tempo and the demand, Ken.
it's a total demand of of everything you've got, because you're not only the operational quarterback, but you have all the admin work that you have to do on top of that. So you have to schedule all of these agents and your whole team, and it has to mesh with the other teams. And so there was a lot that went on with that. And so, but that was what I loved, is I got to do the admin part of it, but then go be operational and make it all work. And I think that really fit me. I think I don't think anyone's going to touch my record, because I did that job for 2 years and 7 months, and the only thing that dislodged me from that was they made me leave. And I remember
A
I,
promotion, no doubt.
no, shoot, they just kicked me off. But they the boss pulled me up to the front of Air Force One, and he said, "Hey, man, uh, uh, about time for you to move on to something else, isn't it?" And I said, "No, sir, it's not." I said, "I'll stay here till I retire if you'll
Right.
let me." And he said, "Well, we're not going to be doing that." He said they'd already figured out where I was going. I was the only one who didn't know
That's
that
funny.
this was a done deal, and it's a long story. But at any rate, yeah, they pushed me off of there. And but the key phrase that he hit me with was what you said. He said, "I know you'd stay, and you'd do a great job until your dying day, but
Right.
you got to give somebody else the opportunity to do what you do."
Hmm.
That just was like a dagger in my heart. It's like, oh, I've been hogging this position, a long time, and it's time to give somebody else a chance to do what.
Sure. Yeah. No, and you know what? And in the moment, right, we don't know what we don't know. And so when that kind of comes to light, there's another opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? It was good. I mean, I had more good opportunities after that, and, great career. So timing, it wasn't my choice in timing, but it was still the right thing. So
No
that's all.
doubt. Now, if so, Clinton, Obama, and Bush,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Okay. Um, you get time in their presence. And this is the thing. I had limited time with President Trump. They're just regular people, man. They're just regular people that have a really difficult job. They put their pants on the same way, have the same problems, same concerns, same fears,
You bet.
same doubts. I mean, but they have an extraordinary responsibility. Um, Speak to me about tension and its application the way that you see it, because some people um, think that tension is a bad word.
Yeah. No, great question. I'm glad you asked that, because that's really where I open the book, is talking about tension, and how tension's not always a bad thing. I mean, you got to have some tension on a rope if you're going to climb it. You got to have some tension in your life if you're going to thrive and do stuff. And sometimes tension can be a good driver, but you can't overdo it. You got to find that balance and that right tension. And the term actually came from a training instructor that we had out at the Secret Service Academy, and what they were doing to us was pushing us to one side or the other, where we couldn't acquire that right tension. And then when they let us get the right tension, it seemed so easy and so right. But you would go in after getting beat up and shot at and yelled at and everything's going bad into a scenario where there's nothing wrong. But whenever you walk up to serve a subpoena, make believe subpoena, and the receptionist says, "Well, I need to get a pencil," and you're like, "Bah, get your hands right," and
Yeah,
you're
no
going
doubt.
nuts. And they're like, "Stop, actual stop. You got to do it again." Now look, you can't go in there all jacked up. You got to
Right.
go in with a different tension level. You've got to read the situation and figure out the appropriate tension for the moment. And and that's true when you're doing more street cop kind of work, that you can't approach everybody with a drawn gun and
No
say, "I
doubt.
want to see your hands." You got to go talk to people like they're people, and you let them escalate if it's going to escalate. But all the way up to the point where even working a rope line with the president, there are different tension levels. And I would always say, key off the supervisor that's there working with you and the president, and look and see how they're interacting with the people. What's the vibe of the crowd? And the vigilance is the same no matter what, but you can back off just a little, give them some space, and find that appropriate tension level, given the situation and given the scenario that you're in. And so my the whole point of the book, and what I was trying to get at, is that there's an appropriate tension for life as well. And you can't go all out all the time. You do need rest. You do need to gain some perspective on things at times. And so yeah, you gotta figure out what's the appropriate tension given the situation.
No doubt. You know, I got a little ahead of myself, and I apologize. You wrote in the book when you were speaking about your sons,
Mm.
and it's just so funny. I had said this about my daughter a couple weeks ago when somebody asked me about her. That you said that you appreciate the way they treat people.
Mm.
Man, uh, my daughter's 27, and she thinks the measure of her is the career that she has, or how successful she is
Mm.
in that career, or the fact that she, and I said to her, I go, the measure of you is is your heart, like, is how you treat people. That's the measure of you. And when you said that about your boys, I was just like, yeah, man, like, this guy, success isn't isn't based on your job. It's who you are as a person and how you treat other people. And you said that about your boys, man, that you appreciate the way that they treat people. I said, well, that's somebody that's raised some really well balanced, guided, directed young men. And it caused me many times during this book, Ken. I put it down, and and deliberately it forced me to pause
Mm.
and reflect and do a little inventory on my relationship with God, where I am as a father, as a husband, as a friend, and not in a heavy kind of. um I didn't feel ever that I was getting beat up. And sometimes I've read books where I've gone, wow, this is I'm a horrible person. Like, I'm really failing miserably here. I am not holding up my end of the agreement, and I got quite the opposite sense and takeaway, and I really like the way you were able to weave faith
Mm.
into like a real world application of walking this earth. Like, what does this look like? And you started talking about the importance of, you know not being perfect. That the direction is more important than obtaining or trying to, you can try to achieve perfection. That's a lofty goal, but it's more important the road that you take to go about it. I thought that that was really, talk to me about direction over perfection, if you would.
Yeah, it's it's been my problem. I think certainly the Secret Service and the President's detail in particular, the pursuit of perfection is encouraged. I mean, they want
Sure.
perfection, but and what I put in there is a bit of a confession that I've expected that of myself. I've been frustrated with myself when I don't achieve that, and I've expected it in family. Maybe some of my teammates and some of the people that I've supervised too, and I found that letting that go is pretty healthy, and it's not like you let it go completely. That's still the goal, is still perfection.
Right.
And certainly if in a more of a religious sense, if you're into Christianity, the expectation is perfection, but it's not the test. So that's the thing. I think you for me, finding that appropriate tension means, well, I'm going to strive for perfection, but
Sure.
I'm not going to demand it of others or expect it in myself. But it's still the goal that I'm
Right.
shooting for. And when I noticed I was doing that to my kids, expecting perfection, it's like, wow, I'm glad nobody did that to me, because I
Right. Right.
it's not a fair standard to hold people to. And I think once you kind of find that tension within your faith, boy, that it gives you room to operate. And as long as you're moving in the right direction, you can let go of perfection and
No doubt.
understand that you're not going to achieve perfection. But as long as you're moving in that right direction, I think those are good steps.
No doubt. No doubt. I don't want to say I take issue because those are strong words, but you made me think, and you can agree or disagree. Your wife, you mentioned
I
her
agree
through.
with my wife. Whatever it
Yes,
is,
yeah,
I agree.
that's a good call, man. Um, I, she's mentioned several times throughout the book. Um, Amazing woman. She sounds a lot like my Nicole. I noticed though, and I want to kind of call you out on this, and you can agree with me or not. You had you had said numerous times throughout the book about praying and consulting God and God's will,
Mhm.
depending on whatever the outcome was. And you had mentioned, I noticed, and maybe this was by design or not, but the times that you consulted your wife, the times that you and her sat down and had a discussion and prayed over things, things worked out. The times that you didn't, I don't know so much that it wasn't you consulting with God as it was you consulting with her. I wanted to draw this thing that, and it was my takeaway is that she was that holy presence in your life, the real, tangible work of God. Have I lost my mind?
No, no, you haven't. And I guess the way I would sort of craft around that is that certainly she's got her own relationship with the Lord, and I've
Sure.
got my relationship with the Lord. What what we found is that, and we have a term for it. We didn't make it up. We just call it oneness. And what we found is that if she's ahead of me or I'm ahead of her, well, praying together is great, but if one's ahead of the other, it's not the same. And so what we want is that oneness. And if we are seeking the Lord and praying together, it's almost like this triangle that the closer you get to the Lord, the closer you get to one another. So a lot of times I would think and sort of feign praying and act without consulting and without praying with her over something. And lo and behold, that's the idiot's way to go about it. But when I would consult with her and pray with her, well, that changed things. I think it changed things for me because maybe I got to see her perspective on something, but it also changed her. She got to see my perspective. And then if we together sought the answer, there's your answer. And so
Right.
I feel like that oneness in pursuit of him and his will in our life was the best way to go about it. Not that we always did that, but that was the best way to go about it.
Right.
And those
Yeah,
are
I
the,
think when you did that, good things happened.
yeah, things tend to work out better, and things tend to be better at home when we would pursue them that way. I mean, you're married for a reason, and so that makes sense to us.
Right.
We again, it's thankfully it's a pursuit of perfection in the right direction, because we're not perfect at it,
No
but
doubt.
we have definitely found that when we consult with one another and then consult together, things tend to go a lot better. And I feel like we hit that sweet spot.
Sure.
Even things like writing a book, I consulted with her. She helped me in the process, and I'm wiser because for that effort, that she put into it. So
That's yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate you explaining that. Um, when we talk about God and decisions, there wasn't a time that you were at a crossroads, that you didn't ask for some guidance and direction. And it's, I guess, and you pointed out in the book, a lot of times, if we're honest, right, we make our decision, and then we want God to endorse it. And I've read that a half dozen times, and I went, that's the way it is. That's the way we are. We we don't. Why is it that way? Why is it that way, Ken? That we we want the blessing. We ask for our wife's hand in marriage, and then we go to the Father for a blessing. You know,
yeah,
we've got it. We've got the cart before the horse.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think and that is what I was talking about. And you really probably did a better job than I did in the book of explaining that. But if you put the horse in front of the cart, it works a whole lot better than the horse pushing the cart. And so when I consult God first, it works a whole lot better if I have a sense of the right direction versus, all right, God, here's what I'm doing. Now bless me as I
Right.
go. And a lot of times I think God says, well, been nice for you to ask me first.
Right.
And so I don't think, I don't think he owes us a blessing on top of bad decisions. So I think it's a whole lot better. Sometimes we get to make that decision again and seek him first. But yeah, I think you're right. I think when we get the order correct, things tend to go better.
When that happens, and you talk so much about so many different things in the book, that balance between um, distance, access, and safety for your heart. Talking about kind of like who you let in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I love the analogy. We started talking about perimeters, inner perimeters, outer perimeters. Who has unfettered access? Who are you giving access to your heart? And um, with all that being said, striking that balance can be difficult at times.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think and that's again, it goes back to the perfection versus direction. Finding that right balance, yeah, that's not an easy thing.
no,
And anyone who says they've figured it all out and they've got it all nailed down is probably doesn't realize how bad they are at it.
no doubt.
So I think that's why I think it's good to have that direction to operate in instead of this need for absolute perfection. And at least in my experience, if you're trying to hit a pin dot, that's great. But if the pin dot is way out there, well, now we can move toward the pin dot, trying to achieve perfection. But but we're measured along the way by direction. You're hitting the mile markers. That's good. Keep
Right.
going in this direction. And whether it's a professional endeavor or a personal endeavor, I think direction beats perfection.
Right. Um, when you pray, Ken, if I can ask a very personal question,
Yeah.
when you pray, I how do you know? Because there's a patience part of praying that I think most of us aren't really comfortable with.
Yeah.
Because, well, when I pray, and it can't be a prayer, a selfish prayer. It's a prayer for maybe some direction or some support or for another. I had a friend who lost his daughter
Mm.
this past week, and I prayed that God would support and guide and hold him and his family. So, how do you know that the prayer? And this is probably an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it because I don't know. How do you know when the prayer is answered, or is it still in the queue? Like, I'm not trying to be cute, or I'm just like,
Yeah.
because I think I know the answer, but how do you know?
Yeah. Prayer is such a kind of a multifaceted kind of thing. I mean, we know we have modeled prayer from Scripture. Here's how you should pray, and even
Sure.
Jesus gave more instruction about how we should not pray than
Right.
how we should pray. But he certainly gave us the model prayer of how we should pray, and so that's helpful and beneficial. I think when it comes to asking for things, he said to your model is to give us today everything that we need, your daily bread,
Mm.
and forgive us. Help us to see where we've let you down, and help us to forgive others in the way that you've forgiven us. So, it really breaks down what you ask for. Going back to the Old Testament, Solomon was considered the wisest man to ever live because he asked for wisdom. And
Right.
wisdom had already been given.
Mm.
He was already
By the
wise,
fact that he knew that he needed to ask for it.
asking for wisdom. And so I think, I like to think of prayer. In fact, I've recently started, everyone's told me about prayer journaling and all this stuff. I feel like my whole life, and I've always kind of not done that because I didn't,
Right.
maybe it's kind of like what you're talking about. I didn't want to know if there was an unanswered prayer that's just lingering in my prayer journal. But I've recently started doing that, or at least started trying to do that,
Uh huh.
and and putting dates on things, and asking for things, and um, what what I've leaned into. In fact, I leaned into it yesterday because it came up in my routine. Is that you part of the prayer life is and I got this out of Psalm 37. It says to trust in the Lord. So that's easier said than done.
Right.
Commit your way to the Lord, delight yourself in the Lord, and then be still. And so if you've trusted, you're delighting in Him. It's a relationship, not a religion, and you're committed to Him. Now you can be still and wait for Him. And how many times are we told in Scripture to wait for the Lord and see His will be done? And what I've found a lot of times is the things that I'm praying for, um, they kind of dissipate in the process of praying and waiting. And where I wanted, this thing or this job or this whatever so badly, in the process of praying and waiting, some of those things dissipate. And it's like, I'll never forget when I was a kid, I could not. I loved the game Battleship,
Right. Okay.
and I wanted Battleship so badly. Every time I went to someone's house and they had the game Battleship, we had to play it. And we had to play it until we were sick of it. And so for Christmas, I asked for Battleship, and I got it. And I never played it again. And it's like, you
Yeah.
know, And there's some kind of thing about the radio too. I listen to the radio, and that way when a favorite song comes on, it's a big deal, and it's like, well, I can appreciate that because I didn't engineer that. Whereas if I've got it on a, my iTunes playlist, every other song, you get sick of hearing it and you don't appreciate it as much. And there's something in there about the way God answers prayers, and certainly we're praying that not my will be done, but your will be done. And so I think when we've leaned into him to the point where we can say that and mean it, now we've arrived somewhere.
Say that and mean it.
Yeah, that's hard. And that's a real, you're in a real relationship with someone when you can say, here's what I want, here's what I'm hoping for, and yet I know you know better, so you tell me.
Mm.
And you know what? I can hold it with an open hand and say, here it is. You make it mine or take it away, your choice. And I'll be good either way. And hey, there have been plenty of times where I've said that and not meant it. And I think I got tested.
Sure.
But there are other times when I truly meant it, and then you just see God's will being done. And I talk about in the book some of the moves we made, some of the jobs I accepted, some of the jobs I didn't get, where we were at a point where we were truly open and honest that saying, here's what we want, here's what we think would be best for us, and yet you know better. We believe in you, we trust you, and we're going to let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We'll look forward to your response and see what happens.
Right. And that I guess that gets back to the cornerstone of having faith.
You bet. Without faith, that doesn't make any sense.
No, and I think that's if I'm being honest, that's what I struggle with.
Hey, welcome to the club. I think we all struggle with that. I think that's such a hard thing. Anyone says their faith they've never questioned their own faith. I question whether they've got faith. I think that's part of the journey. It's part of, that's why he says to commit your way to him. And so when questions of faith come up, let them come up. Yeah, God's not afraid of that. And
no, of course not.
I think he kind of welcomes it. It's certainly the Old Testament writers, a lot of the Psalms are saying, what's taking you so long? It's like you're sleeping. Wake up, help us. We need help.
We're so quick to believe in evil and Satan, right? There's no doubt, right? There's no doubt that he exists, but we won't.
So plain.
We don't. Well, there has to be a counter to that, right? So if we believe without a doubt in the devil, why do we struggle to believe wholeheartedly in a God? It makes no sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's part of the human condition. I think we're, sinful people have sinful thoughts and sinful actions, and it's just it's like gravity. It's like a constant pull for you to do the wrong thing. And so when we overcome that gravity through him and we do the right thing, boy, how awesome is that? I mean, how unique and glorious is that when we're able to, through him overcome the gravity of what's going on in the rest of the world. But I mean, you just look out there and see what's going on, and evil abounds and bad things are happening. I'm on the board at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and sometimes I think I know too much. I see too much.
Yeah, I bet you. I wanted to touch on that because I'm sure there are some people, Kevin Brinzetti, who and the Tim Tebow Foundation are working with Operation Light Shine and just trying to provide resources for our law enforcement partners to address this, protect our most vulnerable, right, communities, our kids. That's another podcast, man. I can only do so much in one sitting, man.
Hey, we just set up the next one. So that's
great.
My
goodness, you've got that right. so many great insights. And, I like how you know, when we started talking about perimeters and supporting and there's some things that we can do to set ourselves up for success. Real world. Um, it's funny. So when you started talking about all your time away and all the times that you spent in hotels and not at home just because of the demands of the job, um, I've been traveling more because of uh, what I've been my speaking and reaching out and getting with our people. And I I don't ever put myself in a position to fail. I I not only do I not that I would succumb to temptation, whatever that would be. It comes in various forms, but I set myself. I know, right? I make an informed decision, and I go, you know what? Uh, I am going to have room service. I'm not going down to the bar to get dinner. I'm going to have food brought to my room. I can unwind. I can work on my computer, and I can guarantee I'm not going to have a conversation with anybody that I shouldn't. Simple,
Yeah.
easy. I can do that. Um, I've always, when I counsel officers at a crossroad, you know what to do. This is not some mystery. You know the solution to the problem. You just you got to implement it. And
Yeah.
and maybe that means um going back to your room. Maybe that means not picking up the phone, not answering the door. I think we always know what the right thing to do is, right? Inherently, we know.
Yeah.
But
I
do we?
think we do. I think we try our best to ignore sometimes, and I mean honestly, I've given up alcohol because it makes it easier to not think about the right thing to do. But I think we set ourselves up for success, like you're talking about, when we think ahead of time. What's in my best interest here, and certainly there are places that you you can go, and there would be nothing wrong with going there. But do I have to? Do I need to? And
Right.
so you set yourself up for a win by avoiding silly
Yeah.
pitfalls and stupid mistakes that we've all made, and that, hopefully don't make them again. But certainly I think we do deep down know what's the right thing to do in just about every situation.
I'm glad you said that because we're pretty intelligent. We're pretty. We know
I
it's.
think cops in particular, you
Oh,
got
we
spidey sense
know.
for
Of
what's what
course.
what what could go wrong here, and it's
You know
fine.
how I avoid having a drink at the bar?
You
I don't
don't
go
go
to
to the
the bar,
bar.
man. I don't go to the bar.
Yeah, yeah,
How do you win a fight with Mike Tyson? You don't get in the ring. That's how you
yeah,
win, man. You don't
yeah,
get in
yeah.
the ring. Um, I'm glad in the book you started tying in some leadership discussions and principles because holy smokes, man. Now listen, I know we've had leadership problems since we've had men leading other men, right? There's always been leadership problems,
Right.
but you broke it down into having a vision, discipline, and integrity, and needing all three. You can do without. You don't get the best mix. The one you can't do without is integrity. You can have you can be high on some other scales, low on some others, but without integrity, man, um, we're not going anywhere. We're not leading anyone without integrity. Speak to me about vision, discipline, and integrity, if you would, Ken.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, the funny thing about that chapter is that I was approached by a friend who was in politics, and he said, "Hey, I want to write a book about leadership with you." And I was like, I'd already written most of Cheating Death, and I'd already received kind of the encouragement to go forward and try to get it published. So I was in that process when he approached me with this idea of writing a book about leadership. So, my writing juices were flowing, and I was like, yeah, that's great. Let's do it. So I started doing research about leadership, and I'd already been to, the government puts you through all these
Of
leadership
course.
courses in American University, Harvard, and all this stuff. And of course doing it, you've been doing it.
Right.
So I was like, well, this might be in my wheelhouse. I could probably generate a book, but let's go do some research and let's read all the best books out there about leadership and find out what's trending and all this stuff. I just want to be current with it and let's do this. Well, and then I started writing and, I told my buddy, I said, brother, I think I don't have a book about leadership. And I'll tell you why, is because all the books out there, all the experience that I've had, all the schooling that I've had on leadership is great. But I really think the best part of it is to boil it down into what's simple, what's replicatable, what's memorable, and what's doable for the most amount of people. And in the process of making it simple, I boiled it down to vision, discipline, and integrity. And I said, I don't have a book about leadership. I got a chapter on
Yeah.
leadership. So I put it
No.
in Cheating Death. We still hadn't been picked up by a publisher at that point. So I added it in
Yeah.
with some stories from Secret Service and each of those three buckets for me, I can put all the advice that I read and had learned over time into one of those three buckets. And
Sure.
some of them you kind of had to force in there, but it worked. I mean,
No,
if
no
you
doubt.
got to
Sure.
keep it at three, it's these three things. And so vision, I put first because I said without vision, if you don't know where you're going, how are you supposed to lead anybody to get there?
No doubt.
If it's like Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods can hit the ball a mile, but if he doesn't know where the hole is and he's just hitting, he might hit it away from the hole. I mean, that's
Right.
worse.
Yeah. No
So
doubt.
leaders got to have vision. And so within the vision bucket, for me, there's a whole lot of stuff, but it's about authenticity, transparency. Being a good leader with vision means that you include your team in what you're doing and see where you're going. And sometimes your good vision means you look behind you. See what does the team want? And I put a story in there. I think it was my last flight on Air Force One, and we were
PB and
going.
J's, baby.
Yeah, PB and J. My poor team. I was the shift lead, operational shift leader, and we were going to Philly and then to New York, and the Air Force crew was always great. I mean, they took good care of us. At some point, one of the crew members picked up on the fact that I liked their coffee. I asked him about it or something. So every time I got on the plane, there was a cup of coffee at my seat on the plane, and I knew who put it there. So at any rate, we fly to Philly, such a short hop, and they'd put salads out there for us to eat, which was great. Good healthy meal for Secret Service agents to
Right.
eat.
No doubt.
There's no time to take off the vest and unwind. You worked them to Andrews Air Force Base. You get on the plane, they're eating, I'm briefing them, and then we land. I mean, it's just that fast going to Philly. Well, now they're on their feet, hot day. We're getting back on the plane and we're going to New York, another such a short hop. And they're going to be on their feet again all night. And the crew had put out these, maybe this is when they put the salads out. I can't remember, but there wasn't much to it. It was a little bit, but, and one of my agents said, man, I wish we had something that would stick to our ribs, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so I had a minute. I walked back to the crew and I asked him, I said, hey, is there any way we could get some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in these guys before we get to New York? And man, it was crushing because the look from this Air Force crew member was just like, like they had failed us or something. And I was like, no, dude, we love you. We need to stick something in them that's going to stay. And then they came with the greatest peanut butter and jelly sandwiches anyone's ever eaten.
No doubt.
But the point of the story was that if I'd been thinking ahead, if I had my vision hat on square, I would have realized we need, just even if I just think of what I need and apply it to them, we need to get some sustenance in these guys before we get back on our feet in New York and do it all again. And so it took hearing that, maybe looking behind you, as you lead, to prompt the leader to do what a visionary leader would have done on the front
Right.
end. So,
Yeah, no, that was a great story.
I think the other point about vision that I made in the book is I talked about the protective operations driving course and how when you enter that course, it's a sea of orange cones, and you're not allowed to hit the cones, or they take time off your best speed, and you may not make it. In order to graduate from this school, you have to make it through the course in a certain amount of time, doing all the maneuvers and all the stuff, and you've got to get it red hot. I mean, you've got to go hard.
No doubt.
And they've got fast cars, so it's designed as a speed course. But if you hit cones, they take time off, and you're just not going to make it. And I remember the first time we looked at the banana curve. Sounds easy. It's just a big white right-hand wide sweeping curve. But at the end of it, the cones are so close together that if you don't nail it perfectly, you will hit the cones on one or both sides. I mean, you really have to nail it,
Sure.
and you got to be flying. So there's no time to correct, if you didn't set it up.
Right. You're talking to an old motorman about cones, man. This is right in my wheelhouse.
Yeah. And so we'd been learning all these 2 weeks of this course, how to brake hard, how to steer hard, how to do all this cool stuff. But he saved the best piece of advice for last, because when we got to that point, we're still hitting cones. Every time you do a red hot run through there, you're hitting the doggone cones. And we're like, this is impossible. You can't get through the course in that time without hitting the cones. And he said, watch this. And he got in the car. And he rode it hot, and he did it, and he didn't hit any cones, and he made it under time. And he said, do you want to know the secret? And we were all like, we thought you'd already given us all the secrets.
Yeah.
Yes, tell us the secret before we choke you out.
No, and now, please, now.
Yeah. So he said the key is not where you put your hands or your feet with this. You got to go fast. So you're using those. But this time you have to look above the cones. You got to look through the curve to the opening. If you look at the cones, you'll hit the cones. But if you look at the opening through the curve where you want the car to go, your hands and your eyes will work together to hit that opening. And that allows you to build up the speed to get through it. And I'm telling you, I use this in everyday driving. I look through the curve. You still see with your peripheral vision the problems, the cones, the stuff you're not supposed to hit, but you're not focused on them. And if you focus on the cones in life, you're going to hit the cones. And if you're worried about perfection, this is where you hit the cones. And then after you hit a cone, you sit there and you stew over the cone. But if you lift your gaze up and look through those cones to the opening you want to hit, then you hit that too. And like setting goals and getting serious about hitting your goals, and you'll hit those.
Right. No.
So that's vision. Discipline, I think, goes with it. I think most people would agree that's got to make a top 3. And it helps if you love your job. As you and I talked about earlier, loving your job makes discipline in the job kind of a natural thing. If you're expected to stay in shape, well, getting in shape is part of it, and you've got to find a way to make that an enjoyable thing. But without discipline in our personal and our professional life, you're going to have a hard time.
I've never seen an overweight Secret Service agent. Why is that?
Well,
did you say standards? And
standards,
the adherence to standards, and making it a priority. Weird.
Yeah, that is weird, isn't it? I mean, imagine having expectations for people who want certain jobs. Yeah, that's it.
You don't want to get me started on that.
And then integrity is my last thing. And, in the book, I talk about how you can be a great leader, a very, very effective leader with just vision and discipline. But without integrity, you end up with a great leader like Hitler. Somebody who's with no integrity is wreaking havoc on the world with tremendous vision, tremendous discipline, but no integrity. And it's the worst leader. You go from great potential to doing terrible things without integrity.
No doubt. No doubt. And that ties in, to how we need to live our lives. We don't need to be perfect, but having integrity, owning our failures, right? Not blaming, not pointing, not assessing blame. Um, Having that integrity, I think, allows us to get it right moving
I,
forward.
I think so. I think, people people will follow a leader without integrity, but they usually do it out of fear.
Mm,
And that does not breed the kind of following that most of us would want. But leaders who lead with vision, discipline, and integrity tend to see people lining up to follow them.
yeah. You have some quotes in the book. One, from Colin Powell. Leadership is solving problems. The day soldiers stop bringing you their problems is the day you've stopped leading them. They have either lost confidence that you can help or concluded that you don't care. Right. Either case is a failure of leadership. Um, just so important. Caring for your people. As you start bringing this book home, we talk about embracing hardship in chapter 9. Um, hard to uh, in hindsight, I realized that those failures, those tough times were necessary. Were necessary for the growth that I needed to experience. But in the moment, man, that's a hard sell.
I agree. I agree. It's a hard sell in the moment. I think certainly hindsight we get that 2020 vision where we see the why in the moment, in the pain and suffering, the hardship that we've all had to endure of one kind or another. It's a little difficult to appreciate the why, and you just want it to stop. You just want it to be over with. But what I've found is that for the most part, hindsight, you do see the why, and you do come to appreciate how hardship changed you into who you are now, and get to appreciate that. And so, hardship can be used for our good. And there's a quote in the Bible that says that all things work for the good of those who love Him. And there's another one that says that if you allow the training to be used, you'll be made into something better and different. And so um, and I don't remember if I use this analogy in the book, but there's this pruning of a grapevine analogy, and sometimes you have to prune that grapevine. The grapevine doesn't appreciate it, but they grow
Right.
better grapes when they're pruned properly. And sometimes we need to be pruned, and we don't enjoy it at the time. Nobody enjoys that, but it tends to be for our good. Either it's a correction that needs to be made, or it's a change. It's a direction changer to get you moving in the right direction.
No doubt. You got in the book, don't avoid or fear hardships in your life. Welcome them as an opportunity. And if we can get that, if we can believe that I don't know why, man. I don't know why I'm going through this now, but this is an opportunity. I just don't. I may not have the ability to see what that is right now. What a what a way to empower.
I think for me, writing that was also um, somewhat aspirational. I haven't arrived at that yet. That's
No,
that is that is me reminding myself about the right direction, so that the next time uh, my wife's diagnosed with cancer,
I
or
was I was going to tie that in because that's her acknowledging that there's an opportunity here in this pain, in this horrible life event.
we have had a couple of hardships, not unlike everybody out there, but a
Right.
miscarriage, cancer that has now been beaten. Um, and hey, I've not gotten every job I ever applied for, every position I ever thought that I deserved. But the hardships have been great lessons. And I think, if you talk about us as a couple, having gone through that hardship together and endured it together, I think on the front end of it, we decided intentionally that we were going to do this together. You come out the other end of that, and man, now the sun is shining and things are good. And there's an aspect to our relationship that didn't exist before, and we've managed that hardship and we endured that hardship. It taught us, it trained us, and it moved us into a better marriage, a better position together as a couple.
Yeah, no doubt. Your wife's letter or speech that she wrote to speak, it was it a woman's prayer group or
Yeah, it some kind of Bible study or prayer group
but
kind
so,
of thing.
and I just said, well, there's Ken's strength, man.
Yeah, you got that right.
I said, there's Ken's strength. Um,
Well, I go back to, your opening comment about the boys and how they
yeah,
treat people. Guess who was here when I was traipsing around to,
oh,
74 countries?
right.
She was the one teaching, training, showing them the right
Instilling
way.
that
I got
character.
absolutely, and I got to reinforce that when I
Sure.
was home. But day after day, it was Sandra doing that with the kids and teaching and training them, so she made
Right.
my job a lot easier.
You, I already talked about that, in your relationship with God. Many times I've questioned his methods, but I've never had to question his intentions. I think that that's just something, it's so great to remind people of that. Hey, this guy's on your side, man. He's rooting for you. He's your biggest fan. Um, he doesn't ask a whole heck of a lot in return, right?
Yeah,
And so that was a moment, that I caused that caused me to pause and kind of reflect. Um,
I think when we treat God as a religion, as a being who has boxes that demand to be checked, it gets a little rough, because if that's if that's the if that's it, if that's all there is, then it seems like the boxes are endless, and they're all on an uphill incline anyway, trying to check these boxes and get checked bigger, better boxes. But when we treat it more like the relationship, which is what he offered, then I think we find that God is very personable, very forgiving, and very loving, and God doesn't care so much about the boxes being checked as he does about the relationship. And so when we lean into him and we do, prayer. You talked about going on prayer walks and
yeah,
just talking to him. I I think God, that's what God wants. He wanted a relationship with his creation, and and certainly because of sin, there was a chasm created there, but he bridged that chasm with the sacrifice. The only sacrifice that would have done the job was his own son, and so when we lean into that, we get the relationship, and we can kind of skip the whole religion thing, and lean into the relationship. So I that's the way that I tend to look at it. That's the
right.
way I I I think that's a better way to kind of go about it and see it. And so when I see the tendency in myself and others to check the religious boxes, then I kind of, these days it kind of makes me wince and say,
Understood.
that's I don't think that's where he wants us to be. I think he's much more interested in a relationship.
Yeah, that seems to be very sterile, very, I don't know what the right word is for it, but not not deeply rooted.
Yeah. Yeah, every religion's got boxes to check. I
Yeah,
mean, it's just different boxes, right? I mean, some of them
very
have
I
overlapping boxes.
yeah, I think, What kind of it's like our relationships with people. I would argue that the vast majority of people that are in our lives, um, we certainly have more acquaintances, right, than we do true friends. Um, you mentioned that in the book about, right. That's a short list, man. It's a
Yeah,
short list. Um,
yeah,
and because they're God doesn't want to be an acquaintance, right?
right.
That's a superficial relationship that can come and go. Um, I think that's where we're at with
Yeah.
that, right? Yeah.
I think and I'm thinking back now, even, and I'm going to sound preachy, but you go to Matthew chapter 7, where Jesus was asked, "What's heaven going to be like?" And he took the opportunity to say, I'll tell you what it's going to be like to be in versus not being in. Is he said that a lot of people are going to say to me on that day, "Lord, Lord," you know, and they're going to get out their list of things that they've done for God and things that they've been for God and money that they've given and how many times I've been to church. And it's going to be a look at all the boxes I checked. And what Jesus said was that he's actually going to turn those people away because he said, "I don't know them. I don't
Mm,
know you." And
mm,
he turned them around and said, I'm sorry. I know your name, but we don't have a relationship. I don't
right.
know you." And, in contrast, the people that God is going to welcome in can probably list sins a mile long. And he's going to say,
Mm.
I've forgiven all of that because of our relationship.
There might be some hope for me yet.
There is hope for you, John.
I love it. Hey, before we wrap, I wanted to touch on wound care.
Ah,
Um, Life will come with wounds. Life will come with all kinds of wounds. Wound care is an important. Make sure you clean that wound well and sew in good medicine and a clean bandage for healing. You will heal.
yeah.
You will heal. Somebody needs to hear that, right?
I'm sure they do. I need to hear it again. That's why I
Right?
wrote it. I think we all need to hear that, and um, that came from a really odd situation that you know about, but it's where I,
Yes.
I had cut myself, and I've got this crazy friend who's a veterinarian, and he came over to the house to look at it, and he confirmed. He said, "Yeah, dude, you got to have stitches like right now. Let's go." And I'd about gotten the bleeding to stop, but he's on the way, so he drove me, and that was great. Um, Bart's a veterinarian, so he drives me. And we're about to the exit where his vet clinic was, and he said, "Hey, I need to stop into my clinic real quick." And I'm like, "Well, which is it? Do I need stitches now, or do you need to stop at your vet clinic?"
I'm
"Really?
bleeding here.
I'm bleeding all over your truck, and I need to, really?" But it's like, well, fine. Stop at your vet clinic.
Yeah.
You just got to put up with certain things with Bart. So we go in, and he said, "Hey, throw those rags in the trash and get that wound under some water, cold water." And I did not want to do that, and I knew that was going to hurt. So
Of course.
I got my hand under the water, and yeah, it was awful. It's like being cut all over again. And he's in another part of his clinic doing something, and he told me to quit whining about it, and all these things. Well, then he comes over and says, "Let me have a look." And he says, "Yeah, that's going to take a few stitches." He said, "But it looks cleaned out. Come over here." And he said, "All right, here's the deal." He said, "I can carry you over to the human hospital, and we can sit in there for who knows how long before they stitch you up, or we can do it right here, right now. You're going to have to forego the pain medicine because I don't have any, but we'll be done in 20 minutes."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, geez, now you just called me sissy if I
Yeah.
don't do it. And I was
Yeah,
like,
no, there's no
he
way
threw
you're not
down. I
having
had
it
to,
done.
I
Yeah.
was like, fine, Bart, sew up my hand. And so he did. And it turned out he didn't need to stop at the vet clinic for anything. He just stopped to sew up my hand, and he knew he could talk me into it. So, and shoot, we were back home in 30 minutes. So, but the point was he cleaned it good. And, we all get these wounds in life, and people hurt us. We can hurt ourselves, but you got to clean that out, and you got to get to the bottom of it. And there's just very little hope for a wound that gets sewed up without dealing with it. And you really have to deal with the wounds of life and the job and your family, and get that cleaned out. And while the wound is open, he put some medicine in there before he sewed it up. And and I think that goes a long way toward what we're talking about in life, is that when we do have these wounds, and we're going to get them, that we take good wound care. And so we sew that up, and then time has to have its way with it too. You don't heal overnight, but in the end, when time has had its opportunity to do its thing, now you've got a good scar to talk about, and a good reminder of what you went through, and something to share with somebody else.
No doubt. No doubt. Ken, before we wrap, some words for the listener. It's a heavy law enforcement listenership, and everything that we've discussed, so many different takeaways. Something from you to them, while they're either on their way in or driving home. And
Yeah.
then I'll make sure that we'll put out all your information on how we can get in touch with you. But some
Well,
final words.
well, I've got a bunch of final words, so we'll see how long this goes. But
No, it's no
the,
limit.
the first thing I want to say is that, on behalf of the Secret Service, who did not authorize or approve of this message, I just need to say thank you, because the Secret Service can't do their job without support. And one of the things that I do as I'm out on the speaking circuit talking is I talk about the value in life of collaboration. And the example that I use is the Secret Service, because I say that, the Secret Service got a big reputation, a big image. And the first thing we do when we walk into a town anywhere in the world is we start asking for help.
Mhm.
And a lot of times we're begging for it. We're demanding help, because we can't do it on our own. We simply can't. It's just too big a mission. There's too many things that we don't know about Broward County, Florida. Even the people who live there, that work for the Secret Service, probably aren't from there. And so it it's a big collaborative effort. There's not enough thank you to go around. There aren't enough coins and hats and shirts and all that to go around to say a proper thank you. But I think just on behalf of the American people, law enforcement needs to appreciate that most of the country is all for you. And the minority of voices out there that are calling for the defunding of police and displacing police departments are, number one, a great minority, but they're also just so misguided.
Mhm.
And as I've thought about this and spoken about this at different times, my what I believe is that it really isn't even about law enforcement. It's about fundamentally changing our country, because these people that hate the United States need for law enforcement to go away so that they can do what they want to do, which is fundamentally change our country.
Sure.
And so they don't want a country like what we have. They need for this country to be destroyed, and they want to rebuild a country that is not of the people, by the people, and for the people. And truly, the only thing that's keeping us from imploding on ourselves, the military is protecting us from the enemy outside. But the only thing that's holding this country together on the inside is that thin blue line. And officers need to know that. Police departments need to know that. The chaplains that support them need to know that number one, no pressure, but we're counting on you. But also that we appreciate you. Thank you for what you do. Your job is so important that it is the thread that's holding this country together. And those voices that are calling for the defunding and all that other stuff, that's not a logical argument. It's not a real argument. It's an emotional argument, but it's at its roots. get rid of the United States, but we have to start with the law enforcement. So please don't listen to that. Please don't think that that's indicative of the rest of us, because everybody else in this country loves law enforcement, loves the police, loves what you do. I don't know if there can be any more TV shows or movies made about cops, but that, to me, that's the indicator of how much you're loved, is when we idolize police officers and make movies and TV shows about them and appreciate them. But my hope is that officers feel supported, that they feel the love from the part of the country that matters to them, that's going to support them when their back is turned. And so we love you and we support you. And certainly if there's anything that I can do, then I want to do that. And that was part of my goal today, was to be with you and to support those officers.
Well, you delivered, sir. The book is Cheating Death. The author, Ken Valentine. Brother, man, thank you so much for your time today. We're all better for it, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you, John. I appreciate what you're doing and love your show, and thank you.
And that is that, my friend.